Ben halter steps onto the porch with hot coffee in hand, same time, same ritual, and spots a bright orange violation notice stapled to his railing. He stood there for a moment, mug warm in his palms, letting the steam curl around his fingers as his eyes adjusted to the brightness of the paper. The wind nudged a corner of it, flapping against the chipped white rail like a flag planted by some fussy bureaucrat. His gaze flicked toward the clubhouse across the street, where the HOA bulletin board stood at a slight angle next to the mailbox hut, casting a long, early autumn shadow. The air smelled of wet leaves, pine, and something sharp, official, somehow. He tugged the notice off with a gentle pull. Loitering without purpose, violation of Clause 17, porch activity exceeding 600 seconds must be purposeful. His brow furrowed. Beneath the bold heading sat a scanned signature that twisted just enough to be familiar. Inside, Tom Halter was already in his usual seat by the kitchen window, flipping through the Gazette with a fork in hand and a plate of cornbread and fried eggs in front of him. He didn't look up when Ben came in. "They get you too?" Ben asked, holding the notice in one hand. Tom squinted over his glasses, lowering his fork. "Well, I'll be. That woman's nuttier than a squirrel in fall." Ben set the mug down, unfolded the paper, and laid it flat on the table. "You think this is Darlene?" Tom leaned in without touching the page. "That's her printin', all right. Loitering, huh? Guess standing still is a threat now." He pushed aside the plate, rummaged in a drawer until he found a plastic folder with a sun-bleached corner. He pulled out a worn HOA newsletter and flipped it open. "Here," he said, tapping the middle of the page. "Last spring's amendments. See this one?" Ben read aloud, Clause 17, prolonged porch presence without evident purpose may constitute visual disruption of communal atmosphere. He looked up. Visual disruption? Tom shook his head slowly. "Sounds like they're fixin' to outlaw front porches altogether." Ben took a bite of cornbread, chewed in silence, and stood up to refill his coffee. The kettle on the counter hissed faintly, just loud enough to fill the room's quiet with memory. His father hadn't changed the layout of the house since 1982. The same red checkered curtain, the same wobbly chair leg, the same uneven slant in the floorboards near the sink. Ben stepped over it without thinking. "I'm heading to Maple Mug," he said. "Need to walk off this fine." The cafe was 3 blocks down, across from a small patch of fenced community grass that used to be a dog run. Now it was just mulch and a faded, "Keep Off" sign. A row of pumpkins sat on the cafe's windowsill, painted with cheerful faces, some already cracking in the sun. The bell above the door gave its usual chirp. "Refill?" asked Lou, already reaching for the pot. "Yeah, thanks." Ben slid a couple of bills across the counter. Lou frowned at the tip but said nothing. At the window table, Ruthie Kim was folding a newspaper with precise hands. She looked up briefly, nodded, and then tapped the paper. They've been rewriting rules faster than printing them. Ben raised an eyebrow. "Clause 17. She smiled faintly. "And 18. And 22. We're up to 37 now." He stirred his coffee. "That's more rules than we had soldiers in my dad's platoon." A man near the back chuckled without looking up from his crossword. "Careful smiling too long. Might count as loitering." Ben walked home slower, letting the breeze trail behind him. Maple Glen had always been quiet, but lately that quiet felt watched. The porches, once filled with wind chimes and rocking chairs, now stood empty, save for the required planters and regulation house numbers. Back inside, Tom had disappeared somewhere into the attic. Ben heard a soft thump, then the groan of an old hatch. 10 minutes later, Tom returned with a long cardboard tube and dust on his sleeves. He placed it gently on the table, uncapped one end, and slid out a brittle sheet of parchment with faded survey lines and block letters. "What's this?" Ben asked. Tom flattened the edges, holding them with his coffee mug and an old hammer. "Parcel map. From the original developer. Found it before your mother wallpapered the attic in '89. Ben leaned over. The ink was still legible in places. Parcel 18 sat nestled between two long rectangles marked Clubhouse Lot and Community Mail Depot. Tom tapped it. This here's where they built that ugly mailbox station. But they never bought the land. Tom unrolls the blueprint on the kitchen table and taps Parcel 18. See this? They think they own it. They don't. Ben leaned closer, tracing the faded lines with his eyes as the old paper curled at the corners. The morning sun slanted through the window, catching on a smudge of jam on the table from yesterday's cornbread. The blueprint felt like a quiet revelation, pulled not from rebellion but from something steadier, memory, maybe, or duty. Ben vaguely recalled something about Darlene's failed dog run project years ago, 2018, maybe, before it had quietly disappeared and left only a few forgotten stakes in the ground and a rolled-up tarp behind the clubhouse. She tried to turn this into a dog park once, he said. Didn't last. Tom grunted. Because she never had the right to use it. Looks like she just assumed no one would notice. This here, he tapped again, more firmly this time, never left the developer's name. And that means it's up for grabs. The kitchen clock ticked over to 8:43. Tom folded the blueprint again, more carefully now, like it had changed status from artifact to ammunition. They moved into the garage, which looked exactly as it had when Ben was 10, an organized mess of peanut butter jars filled with screws, a vintage Coors sign above the shelves, and an army green pegboard lined with tools older than most HOA board members. A map of Maple Glen hung near the light switch, laminated and sun-faded, pinned beside an old photo of Ben's mom holding a lemonade jar. Her smile in the photo was the kind that didn't need approval. Tom flipped open a metal clipboard and started writing. We'll need confirmation. County Assessor's Office. Ben raised an eyebrow. They opened this early. Tom already had his phone to his ear. Mornings like this, I miss rotary dials. By noon, the facts were clear. Parcel 18 was still in the developer's name, with no transfer on file. Technically public until purchased, but nobody had. Nobody except maybe them. Ben stepped out for a walk while Tom stayed back, pulling graph paper from an old drafting folder. The neighborhood had the crisp smell of early fall, pine, smoke, something sweet. Ben passed the central green space, where new "No Pets Allowed" signs had sprouted overnight like invasive weeds. One sat crooked on a stake near the swing set. Another was zip-tied to the chain-link fence that separated the grass from a small patch of worn mulch. A pair of kids kicked a soccer ball lazily between them, glancing once at the sign but not stopping. Their dog, a shaggy mutt with a red bandana, bounced behind, leash dragging. Ben paused. The signs looked recent. Clean laminate. HOA seal stamped neatly at the corner. He continued on to Maple Mug Cafe, where the air smelled like burnt cinnamon and stories people didn't realize they were telling. Joanne sat by the window, her cane leaning against the table, a small box wrapped in brown paper beside her. You two still tinkering with maps? She asked without looking up. Ben smiled. Always. She handed him the box. Peach preserves. Tom likes M with butter on rye. He accepted it with a soft, thank you. Joanne leaned back, expression unreadable. They made me take down Molly's doghouse last year. Said the wood grain was too decorative. Visual inconsistency, they said. Ben's Saturday, clause 19. Or maybe 27 by now, she replied. I stopped counting. Behind the counter, Kyle Wexler was refilling the sugar dispenser. His flannel sleeves were rolled to the elbow, and he moved with the stiff economy of someone trying not to be noticed. He didn't speak, but his hand paused when Darlene's name came up. Just for a second. Ben caught it. Kyle didn't look over. But he knew. That night, the table in the garage became a war room of sorts, silent, deliberate, lit by a single overhead bulb that hummed faintly. Tom measured out dimensions on graph paper, his pencil tapping thoughtfully. Name? Ben asked, watching. Halter Dog Commons, Tom replied, without looking up. Ben smiled faintly. Commons? More honest than anything they've printed. They boxed the plans carefully, sealed the envelope, and left it ready by the front door. "Tomorrow," Tom said. "We file." Ben nodded. "Let's see how she likes that." The next morning, before either of them had fully woken, a new bulletin appeared on the HOA board. Printed in thick blue ink and laminated against the dew, it read: Fall HOA Cleanup Day, Parcel 18 Focus Area. Scheduled this Saturday. A wooden sign appears at dawn: Future home of Halter Dog Commons, all neighbors welcome. The mist hadn't yet lifted from the lawn when the first car slowed. A pale blue sedan eased to a near stop at the edge of Parcel 18, the driver leaning forward slightly, head tilted like someone inspecting a menu written in cursive. The sign stood just beyond the mailbox depot, planted with care between two paving stones and braced against the morning breeze. A single pine tree arched nearby, its shadow still long and wavering across the dew-slick grass. Ben stood a few paces back, hands in his jacket pockets, not watching the sign so much as the reactions it invited. Across the street, their porch now held a new wind chime shaped like a dog bone, Tom's idea. The chime caught a faint gust, letting out a hollow, metallic bark that made them both grin the first time it rang. Tom joined him with a box tucked under one arm and a mallet in the other. "That sign stands straighter than our fence," he muttered. "Let's hope it survives the week," Ben said. They worked in silence. Tom drove in posts for a bench and a simple water bowl station. He screwed in a small bracket for dog leash hooks and mounted a recycled dispenser box with bags labeled, "Take 1. Give 2 back." By mid-morning, more cars had passed. Some paused, others merely glanced. One elderly couple gave a thumbs up through their windshield. Another driver squinted, uncertain, then rolled on. The air had begun to warm, and the last of the fog peeled away from the rooftops. From the far end of the street, a compact black SUV turned the corner and slowed to a crawl as it neared the new installation. Ben didn't have to squint to see Darlene behind the wheel, her lips pressed into a line that seemed carved more than drawn. The SUV stopped for a full 5 seconds, long enough to raise a phone, snap a photo, and then pull away without acknowledgement. Tom chuckled without mirth. "Well, she's seen it. That's what signs are for." By noon, the scent of cut grass mixed with pine and the distant hint of barbecue from someone's backyard. A woman in gray slacks and a tailored coat approached with a small dog on a woven leash. The terrier trotted confidently ahead, tongue out, tail wagging. She paused in front of the sign, one hand resting on her hip, the other holding a travel mug. Ben noticed the glasses first, delicate frames, worn more for presence than vision. Her tone, when she finally spoke, was measured. "I'd advise keeping the receipt for that land." Ben turned. "We filed it with the county." She nodded once, not smiling. "Grace Adler," she said. "My firm handled a boundary dispute 3 streets over." Tom wiped his hands on a rag. "Well, Ms. Adler, if we get dragged into a fight, you'll be top of the list." Grace raised an eyebrow. "HOA fights are like briars. Best to watch where you step." Her dog paused at the water bowl, sniffed, then lapped a few times. Grace took that as permission to linger, walking the edge of the parcel without comment. She nodded again at the sign, then continued down the path toward her home. Ben exhaled slowly. "She'll be back." "I hope so," Tom said. "Sharp folks are rare these days." Later that afternoon, Kyle was seen sweeping the walkway near the clubhouse. He moved slowly, pushing a wide broom in even strokes, eyes mostly down. But every now and then, he looked across the street at the park-to-be. His expression was unreadable, not hostile, not friendly, just aware. A breeze stirred the sign. The wind chime responded with a light clatter. That evening, just before sunset, the mail arrived. Ben retrieved the envelope from their box and walked it back up the drive. It bore the HOA seal in the corner, along with a printed label, Notice of Infrastructure Violation, Parcel 18. He read the letter aloud at the kitchen table. Unauthorized public facility. Citing Local Code 4.5.3b, non-permitted infrastructure expansion. Immediate halt required. Tom scratched the back of his neck. Well, that didn't take long. No, it didn't, Ben said, pulling open the drawer by the fridge. He clipped the notice beside their sign the next morning, just beneath the wooden post. Then, with neat handwriting on a yellow sticky note, he wrote, "We read the rules too. ChatGPT de NOI. A new notice is pinned on every door in Maple Glen, unauthorized construction, parcel 18 under review." Ben spotted it on his way to retrieve the morning paper, fluttering slightly in the wind like a warning dressed in polite language. The font was a little too bold, the paper a little too glossy. He pulled it down with 2 fingers and read the line again. Parcel 18. Under review. A familiar chill, not from the 50-degree air, settled in his chest. Tom joined him on the porch with a mug in hand, his eyes squinting against the morning light. "What's the latest?" Ben passed the notice silently. Tom read, snorted, then sipped. "Told ya. Let em." The clubhouse lights flickered just once as people filed in that evening. The air inside smelled faintly of instant coffee and floor wax, and the old banner reading, "Community First," hung askew behind a folding table at the front. Darlene stood beneath it like a disappointed principal on picture day, hands folded in front of her, smile thin and dry. Rows of chairs filled slowly. Neighbors murmured greetings and unfolded paper agendas from their laps. Ben and Tom sat near the back, side by side. Joanne nodded in their direction, her scarf draped neatly over one shoulder. Ruthie gave a slight wave. Grace stood to the side, one arm crossed over her notebook, the other hand holding a pen as if it might be needed at a moment's notice. Darlene began with no preamble. "There has been an alarming erosion of standards in recent weeks. Unauthorized structures. Disorderly signage. The misuse of Parcel 18, which has historically been reserved for community oversight." Ben could almost hear Tom's eyebrow raise beside him. "We are here," Darlene continued, "to restore order. And to vote on applying standard violation penalties retroactively. Specifically, to impose a fine of $300 per week for infrastructure placed on Parcel 18 without HOA approval." A low rustle moved through the room like wind through dry grass. Tom stood slowly, no drama, just intention. He pulled a folder from under his coat and handed it down the row until it reached the front table. "Certified deed copy," he said. "Filed 2 weeks ago. Parcel 18 now belongs to the Halter family." Darlene didn't blink. "It may still fall under community aesthetic guidelines." Ruthie's hand lifted. "What's the rule against benches and water bowls, exactly?" There was a pause. Darlene's mouth opened, then closed. From somewhere behind her, a chair creaked. Joanne looked around. "Because I remember a time when we encouraged neighborly contribution." Murmurs followed, quiet, tentative. One man in the second row whispered to his wife, another folded his arms, not in defense, but consideration. Kyle Wexler cleared his throat gently. "I'll fix the clubhouse plumbing tomorrow." All heads turned. He shrugged. "Figure we should all do our part." Darlene's face froze in a tight smile that didn't match her eyes. She adjusted the agenda in her hand. "Regardless, as chair, I am submitting Parcel 18 for external review. The Regional HOA Consortium will assess its compliance with governing principles. Their decision will be final." Tom leaned back in his chair, unfazed. Ben didn't move. The meeting adjourned shortly after. Chairs scraped back across the floor. Coffee cups emptied into trash bins. The sun had long set by the time people began spilling out onto the sidewalk, the air now colder, sharper. Grace walked beside Ben without speaking for several paces, her heels clicking lightly on the concrete. She finally broke the silence with a soft breath of cloves. "You'll need more than deeds now. You'll need a story they can't twist." At dawn, Kyle pulls into the Halter's driveway and lifts a weathered box from the bed of his pickup. The truck rumbled to a stop with the kind of quiet effort that came from habit, not haste. Fog still clung to the lawn like it had forgotten to leave overnight. Kyle stepped out slowly, his his shoulders drawn in as if the morning air weighed more than it should. He opened the tailgate, revealing a single cardboard box, edges softened by time, a strip of masking tape across the top with faded handwriting that had long since stopped making sense to anyone but him. Tom was already in the garage, wiping dust off an old folding chair. The other two were angled in a loose triangle, a thermos of black coffee set between them like some neutral meeting point. Ben leaned against the workbench, arms folded, watching Kyle approach without a word. Kyle set the box down gently, then stood back. "I was supposed to shred this," he said. "Years ago. I didn't." Tom tilted his head slightly, but didn't ask why. Instead, he motioned to the chair across from him. Kyle sat. Ben reached for the tape, then paused. "You sure?" Kyle gave one tight nod. "It's time." Inside the box, folders shifted and sagged with age. Ben peeled back the top flap, revealing stacks of paper, HOA memos, printouts, an envelope with a red, rejected stamp across the front. Tom pulled one out and whistled low. "Look at this. 2018 dog run permit. No easement included." Kyle's voice was hoarse. "They filed it anyway. Just never followed up when it was denied." Ben flipped to a new page. "Selective fine memos," he murmured. "Why is this one circled?" Kyle didn't meet his eyes. Those were the ones flagged by Darlene. Residents who question things. Ben read down the list, jaw tight. He turned the next document over, and froze. His voice was quiet. "Your name's on this. It's dated 2017. "I started in 19, Kyle said. Tom didn't speak. He just leaned back slightly and sipped from the thermos. After a long silence, he said, "You saved it. That's what counts." From the side entrance, a light knock on the doorframe signaled someone's arrival. Grace stepped in, unloved fingers wrapped around her travel mug. Her coat was open, glasses perched on her nose, and her legal pad was already under one arm. "I hope the coffee's hot," she said. Tom handed her the thermos without comment. She poured herself a cup, then crouched beside the box, leafing through the files one by one. Her movements were quiet but deliberate, like someone reading the room as much as the text. Ruthie appeared briefly with a foil-covered dish. "Pumpkin pie," she said softly, setting it down. "No one wins fights on an empty stomach." Then she slipped out. Grace tapped a page. "This is a pattern," she said. "Not just sloppy oversight. This is misuse. Forgery. Suppression." She stood, flipping open her notebook. "We start with a cease and desist. Then we draft a demand for public correction. And we copy every regional official who's ever sipped coffee with Darlene Wexler." Ben stood still for a moment, then exhaled. "That's a start." Kyle remained in his seat, hands clasped, gaze low. Tom passed him a piece of pie on a paper plate without saying anything more. At the bottom of the box, nestled under the last folder, was an old leash, leather, worn soft, with a brass buckle dulled from years of touch. Kyle reached for it, held it in his palm, then placed it gently beside the legal pad on Grace's chair. She glanced at it, then turned the last page of a stapled document. Her voice was low but clear. "Parcel 18, she murmured. "This might go federal if we want it to. Someone has stapled flyers around the neighborhood. The halters are endangering community order." They clung to telephone poles and porch railings like warnings from another era, blocky text, aggressive underlining, and bolded phrases that screamed without needing volume. One was tacked onto the bench at Parcel 18, another pinned to the side of the mailbox hut. The paper was thick, freshly printed. It hadn't even had time to curl at the corners. Tom peeled one off the back gate and held it between two fingers. "She's gone to the presses now," he muttered. Ben scanned the text. "Violation of safety codes. Unauthorized gatherings. Threats to neighborhood cohesion." He shook his head. "What does that even mean?" Tom dropped the flyer into the trash bin beside the porch. Means we're winning. Just past noon, Darlene stood near the clubhouse, flanked by two HOA board members who seemed less interested in backing her than in appearing cooperative. She wore a crimson blazer that clashed with the orange leaves swirling at her feet, and her voice projected more than usual, strained, rehearsed, unsteady. "We are not against dogs," she said, "nor porches, nor benches. But rules are what keep communities safe. We cannot allow renegade construction, unverified gatherings, or threats to the fabric of Maple Glen." The words echoed against the side of the clubhouse, but they didn't carry far. Grace walked past mid-sentence, a sealed envelope in hand. She didn't slow or interrupt. She simply set the envelope down on the folding table beside the clipboard Darlene was clutching and continued walking. A few people watched. One teenager whispered something behind his palm. Grace didn't look back. Tom stood by parcel 18 that afternoon, tightening a bolt on the leash hook beside the water bowl. He wiped dust from the wooden post and tacked a new sign just beneath the halter's original. Community open space. Private ownership, verified. The sign gleamed in the afternoon light, framed by a tree whose leaves had gone full flame. At Maple Mug Cafe, the air smelled of cinnamon and roasted apples. Ruthie was seated near the window, knitting something in muted orange yarn. Grace entered with her usual calm, coat unbuttoned, glasses steady, a faint curl of hair tucked behind one ear. Lou poured her a cider without being asked. "Extra cinnamon," he said, sliding it over. "Just how you like." She nodded. "Thanks, Lou." 2 booths away, a couple glanced over. One leaned forward. "She's the one with the papers, right?" The other nodded. About time someone stood up to that woman. Ben arrived with Tom a few minutes later, taking the corner booth. They spoke quietly, nodding occasionally toward the window. Outside, a pair of kids in Halloween capes darted past, giggling as they chased each other near the parcel 18 fence. One of them stopped to pet a retriever tied gently to the new bench. The dog wagged his tail. Later, outside the fence, a reporter from the Hollow Pines Gazette approached Grace as she sipped her cider from a to-go cup. "Can I ask you something on record?" the woman said, adjusting a recorder. Grace nodded once. "What would you call what's happening here? Is this about rebellion against HOA authority?" Grace's lips twitched into something just shy of a smile. "It's not rebellion," she said. "It's remembering how to read the fine print." Back at the HOA office, the afternoon light filtered through slatted blinds, throwing striped shadows across the front desk. Darlene sat alone, the sealed envelope now open in her hands. Her eyes scanned the first page once, then again. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for a pen, though she didn't write anything. From the hallway, Kyle watched in silence, hands in his pockets, the box from last week still waiting on the edge of his memory. By 6 p.m., the folding chairs at Maple Glen Community Hall are full. Everyone holds a copy of Grace's legal packet. Nobody's talking, yet. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed above, slightly louder than usual, filling the space left by nervous silence. The air carried the faint scent of lemon polish and weak coffee, and every window was fogged over from breath and closeness. Outside, pumpkins glowed across porches in soft orange halos, waiting for Halloween night. Inside, something older than tradition stirred, resentment, maybe, or reckoning. Darlene Wexler stood at the front, posture stiff, blazer buttoned too high. A stack of her own printed responses sat untouched beside her on the table. Her smile strained under the weight of eyes not yet angry, but no longer indifferent. "These are coordinated slanders," she began, her voice brittle and too bright. "A small group attempting to undermine what we've built here." Ben sat beside Tom in the second row. Neither moved. Grace was near the wall, her coat still on, folder under one arm, the other hand holding a pen loosely, as if waiting to be summoned. Darlene continued, gesturing with open palms. "The allegations presented are nothing but distortions, taken out of context, misinterpreted, and clearly timed to disrupt seasonal planning and community cohesion." Grace stepped forward, unfolding the packet slowly. "Let's begin with parcel 18, she said, tone calm but unflinching. Here is the deed. Filed legally. Transfer certified. She passed it to the neighbor closest to her, who passed it on. A ripple of motion traveled through the room. Next, Grace continued, internal file logs, time-stamped. These show shredded permit applications, documents related to the rejected dog run plan. Records deleted after they were officially denied. Gasps now. Not loud, but sharp enough to shift the air. And finally, she said, raising the last sheet, expenditure reports. HOA dues funneled into consulting fees. No invoices. No work product. No votes approving these disbursements. Darlene opened her mouth but nothing came. Her fingers twitched at the edge of her printouts. Ruthie stood, slow but steady. She held a slim journal with cracked corners. My husband used to write everything down, she said. He served on the advisory board until he got tired of the meetings that didn't make room for questions. She flipped to a marked page. Here, the rules exist for us, not over us. Joanne followed, voice stronger than expected. They fined me twice for birdseed on my walkway. Said it was a pest concern. But I saw Darlene feed squirrels with a pine cone wreath last winter. The murmurs were now voices. Full volume. Questions blending with agreement. And then, Kyle stood. His voice was low. I filed reports I didn't write. Signed off on documents before I was hired. They asked me to. Said it was routine. Said it was how things worked. He didn't look at Darlene. She told me to ignore requests. Told me which names to highlight. Told me who to watch. No one moved. No one interrupted. I should have said something sooner, he finished. But I'm saying it now. The silence that followed wasn't stunned, it was settling. Then, from the back, I moved to remove the chair. Another voice echoed, seconded. Hands rose. Dozens. Darlene's didn't. Carl, the vice president, stood from his seat beside her, picked up his coat, and walked out without a word. Darlene remained frozen. Her hand hovered near the gavel, then dropped. The gavel clattered once on the table, then rolled slightly. She turned and walked out through the side door, her heels clicking in retreat. As the crowd began to disperse, the air lighter now, a few people lingered by the bulletin board. Tom approached quietly, smoothing a paper in his hands. He pinned it to the center between two outdated flyers. Community Dog Park Cleanup Day. Cider provided. All welcome. Morning sun streaks through red maples. Children play fetch with golden retrievers. Steam rises from thermoses and paper cups. Ben sat on the porch, mug in hand, the rim still warm from a fresh pour. The flannel blanket across his lap held the scent of last night's cedar fire, and a pumpkin rested beside his boot, small and uncarved. From here, he could see most of Parcel 18, no longer just a number on a map, but a place with name, purpose, and laughter. A pair of kids zigzagged between the trees, their dog bounding after a frisbee that sailed like a flat comet. The golden retriever caught it mid-air, prompting a squeal of triumph that echoed against the morning. No flyers had been taped to his mailbox in days. No glares from windows. Just presence. The path through the commons crunched with the light rhythm of footfall and mulch. Kyle pushed a wheelbarrow past the cedar benches, nodding to Ruthie as he went. She handed him a slice of pumpkin bread wrapped in wax paper, which he accepted with a quiet smile before heading toward the corner where the new bench needed repainting. Near the carved welcome sign, Grace sat at a picnic table layered with folders, documents, and a laptop with a cracked corner. She worked methodically, pen tapping once per paragraph, expression smooth and steady. She glanced up only when Tom walked past, adjusting the hinge on the east gate. He tapped the screwdriver against the post. Now it sings. Ben smiled into his cup. The carved sign caught the light just right, letters etched deep into the grain. Respect what's shared. Protect what's yours. Joanne strolled by with her beagle in tow, waving as she passed. The dog tugged at its leash toward a water bowl station, tail a metronome of joy. Behind them, someone tied their husky to a leash hook shaped like a squirrel, its brass catching a glint of sun. Kyle's quiet humor hammered in place. Grace slid a folder into her bag, then clicked her pen closed. She stood and stretched, watching the scene unfold like a story she already knew the ending to. The last page of the trust paperwork sat signed and sealed on the table, ready for delivery to the Graves Park Preservation Fund. Ben rose and walked the trail alone, boots tracing the soft curve of woodchip paths. The trees whispered overhead, the kind of sound that didn't ask for silence, only attention. At the trailhead, he paused in front of the carved sign and reached into his coat pocket. His fingers closed around an old, folded HOA violation form, the first one they'd posted, the one about loitering. He held it for a breath. Then dropped it into the trash bin beside the post, the paper landing with a muted rustle and the lid swinging closed with finality. Later, back on the porch, the afternoon sun casting long golden ribbons across the deck boards, Ben sat again. The world didn't feel smaller anymore. The porch no longer felt like the edge of someone else's lawn. Grace stepped up the path and settled beside him, coat half-buttoned, the last of her files under one arm. She didn't ask anything at first. Just looked out across the commons as a retriever barked once, then twice, chasing shadows in the grass. Finally, she turned. What's next? Ben didn't look over. He sipped his coffee and exhaled through his nose like someone tasting peace for the first time in years. Maybe I'll sit a while, he said. Just because I can. On a quiet October morning, with children laughing near the water bowls and porch lights glowing soft and steady, Maple Glen no longer felt like a place ruled by fear, it felt like home again. What began as a violation notice ended with benches, shared coffee, and neighbors finding their voice beside a cedar-carved sign. When rules are wielded for control, they divide, but when reclaimed with care, they unite us in something stronger than policy, community. Perhaps the lesson isn't just about fighting back, but about sitting down together, side by side, and remembering why the rules were written in the first place. Like a porch reclaimed with presence, not protest, quiet courage can change everything.